This is Jared Krause, host of the Buying Online Business podcast, and this is episode number 9. And I had a very special guest with me, Mr. Charley Valher from Outsourcing Angels, who's been crushing it online for many years. And in this episode, we talk about how to finance buying your first website business. And in this episode, we go really deep, not into just how to be saving more money and set yourself up to buy your first business, but how to be in the right mindset, how to hang around the right people, how to make the right choices to set yourself up to get a really good financial education and have a lifestyle of financial freedom yourself. So if you guys want to go away and learn how to have that financial freedom, live that lifestyle that you really, really want, and do that through buying online businesses or different investments or whatever it is, this is a very, very powerful episode you need to listen to. Hey guys, and welcome to the podcast. I'm talking with Mr. Charley Valher from Outsourcing Angels, which he obviously started about 4 years ago. Now you build it up to about over 100 staff now, and they're just crushing it in this space of outsourcing. So well done with that, Charley. And anything to add to that, or you just want to dive straight into this awesome topic of, how to buy your first business and finance it?
Oh, thank you so much for the warm intro, Jared. I'm really excited. We're going to be talking a lot about personal finances and how to finance websites or online businesses in general today, because I feel like this is an ignored topic, and I know it's something we're both really, really passionate about.
Yeah, I agree. It's very ignored, and it's like nothing. They don't even teach it in school, right? And it's sad to see that not many people, especially myself, when I was a lot younger, not having any financial intelligence. And I think it's a touchy subject for a lot of people because they don't have that financial intelligence and they don't know where to go from it. So that's why we just open up this conversation. And I do have a question for you, Charley. I'm going to start off with a question for you. Is that cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
So for you, how did you buy your first business? Like, did you go away and did you save up all your pennies? Did you have the money already, or did you finance it? Like, how did you go about buying your first business?
Well, I go about it very differently today than I used to. And I want to go back to the starting point because I feel like this is the most important section. It's like, how did I get in and buy the first business or get into the first business? Now, for a lot of people, like I was just like everyone else, is like I did not have a good financial education in my upbringing. In fact, I had an education in what not to do, would probably be the best description of what I received. And like I'd gone into apprenticeship, much like you, and had some really bad financial things going on. And when I say that is, I mean, like I'd almost ended up with, I bought an expensive ute because everyone else had an expensive ute who was a tradie. I went out every weekend because that's what everyone else was doing. And then eventually I hit a point where I wanted to get into business and got some financial education and realized that I was just doing all the wrong things, spending way close to my means, having debt, all these things like that. Now, the first thing I actually did was I took some time. So I worked in a job I hated and just paid off my debt, paid down my debt, bought my car outright. I cleaned the slate before I even thought about going into business, because I thought that if I'm going to go into this and I'm serious about going into business, I didn't want to carry any burdens or not have room to do that. Then I actually saved up some money. So I saved 50 grand. Took me a while, but I went hard on savings. And then I took that 50 grand and used that to finance my first business, which at the time was actually a marketing agency. So I used that to finance the creation of the business. That's probably a bit of an unusual path because there was a lot of like delayed gratification and saving and time when I wasn't, I didn't just jump in and get in on credit cards. I was very diligent, but it worked out really well because I was also able to use that time to actually develop skills. So I did a lot of reading and a lot of education and like developed myself in that time of saving so that when I got into business that I would have a better success rate. So that's how I actually financed and got into my first business, all self-funded through working. But that worked out pretty well for me. That was the method for me. But I'm curious, Jared, how did you go about financing or getting the funds for your first side or business?
Well, very similar to you, except I didn't go away and get into a whole lot of debt. I was lucky that my parents knew that debt wasn't a great thing. And I started learning a little bit about like financial sort of intelligence and reading the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, just as I was coming out of school. And I actually started before I left school. I was just so hungry to make money because I did want the car and I want this flashy lifestyle when I was a lot younger. I realized that wasn't going to make me happy as I grew older, but that's what I really wanted. So I sacrificed so much of my time, right, in working. I got a job quite young as a paper boy delivering the paper, even to a point like I wanted to save so much of my money, like even like just a couple of extra dollars. Like when I was younger, there's a story for you where I might go to the mates. I might go to the movies with my mates. And everybody would go away and catch the bus. I'm like, oh no, I'll meet you guys there. What time's it on? And I'd jump on my bike and I'd ride there, so I didn't have to pay for the bus. And I'd eat at home before I went, so we wouldn't have to buy food out. Like all these little things that stayed with me and sacrifice. And now I don't have to make sacrifices to a point where, I'm like, oh, I don't want to eat something, or I can't do this, or I can't do that because I'm sacrificing, because I had put the time in of sacrificing beforehand. So I slowly worked up and saved the money and was by my parents, like very, like it was very clear to me that I shouldn't go away and get in debt. So I saved up my money and I put a lot of that into the stock market and started making a bit of money when I was quite young in the stock market. And then the GFC happened and all that sort of stuff. And I lost a fair bit of money, and then I had to knuckle down again and start really sacrificing quite hard, saved up some more money. And then I found this whole path of buying websites, and I taught myself to buy them, and I went and bought my one with my savings. So that's how I went about it.
Ooh, there's a common thread here of like both of us are big believers in savings and delayed gratification. So we're not, I suppose you'd call it debt hungry, which I know some people can be and some people are okay with. But I find that fascinating because we tend to get along quite well. So that's just something else, I suppose, in our personality type where we're a bit more about that. So very cool.
Yeah, for sure. And, some of my clients, they do want to go away and buy something with finance. And I see finance is a tricky one. Some people are comfortable, like you said, some people are not. I'm more comfortable with spending the money that I've earned and doing it that way, rather than having more of a stress of like, I've got to pay somebody back. And that's what I don't like about the whole finance thing. But there's options out there for people that want to go about it for sure.
Well, it is an option, but I want to talk about this one a little bit because much like you, over the years, I've seen many people use debt well and terribly. And there's different environments. Like full disclosure is I'm comfortable with using debt now, but I'm many, many years into this, and my confidence and ability to know what to do is like, I'm confident with it, and I would never borrow extremes. But going back, I look and think about it and gone, in my first business, if I borrowed $100,000 and bought a website or something like that, I wouldn't have had a clue how to use that $100,000 well. And the risks in using debt with inexperience, I think, are astronomical. Do you agree with that? Not agree with that?
It's huge, and it's just you see that even not just when people buy a business, but when they go away and buy a car, or anything, they're inexperienced on how long it's actually going to take them to pay off the debt and how much it's actually the car's really going to cost them, right? Say they want to go buy a $40,000 car, the car's not $40,000. It's way more money than that with the interest and the time, and it's not just that. It's not just being conscious of that, but how much time you're in debt as well. So there's so many repercussions from going away and using finance that people never really think about or are conscious of. And that's just, from not knowing, being inexperienced, right? So for you, Charlie, you went and got out of debt and you worked out you had a clean slate, right? And you started saving money and sacrificing and doing all those sorts of things. So what are some of the things that you did to get out of debt and to save money? Like what are some of the things that you did?
Yeah, good question. So like I obviously got a bit of a financial education and read things like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and a few other like programs I did, which made a huge difference in my mindset. So like step one for me was like awareness. Like I just wasn't aware of how I was spending my money or how much money I was spending where. So, like I might have made, at the time I was probably a qualified plumber making about a grand a weekish. And like, all I knew is that there was money in my account at the end of the week. But I had never sat down and made the time to get very aware of like, where's my money going, doing a bit of an audit there. And then also starting to create a bit of a budget. And then this was the huge thing for me is going, all right, how much per week or per month am I putting aside for a better future? And I got better at it over time. In the beginning, I kind of sucked because I did have to make some like lifestyle changes. So like, the idea of, oh, hang on a second, if I go to a nightclub on a Saturday night and get taxis everywhere and shout everyone drinks versus buying a slab and having a barbecue at home, which, God, that sums up my mindset in those days. I don't do anything like that anymore. I don't even drink really, but it was funny that, just distinguishing like those type of activities and the impact was like a really big thing. Or if you went to the movies, it's easy to spend like $50 on movies, which, obviously isn't a big deal to me now. But like back then, I could just as easy like, and this is probably a little bit, also called legal at the time, but I might have downloaded a movie and watched it at home. So it was a lot of like readjusting my lifestyle to go, okay, well, like I still want to do things, but I need to start making decisions that are going to be more aligned with the future I want to have. I have to stop robbing future Charley by spending all the money today. So those were the big things for me. Those were the steps I took. The one area I did spend money, and I'll say from this, is like I started to shift some of my like the money I was spending on entertainment into education, because I knew that in going into business, it wasn't just like buying a business that was going to be the thing or getting into business. It was going to be being educated in this area so I can have even more success. So I bought a lot of books as well, a lot of books.
I love that you said, I've got to stop robbing future Charley. And I think that's something that I really had in my mind. Not that I thought about it, I've got to stop robbing future Jared, but I just knew that I needed to have those sort of sacrifices. And I want to come back to the education thing as well, because the education thing is huge. But first I want to touch on how similar I was at that stage in my life when I would party and do some drinking and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things that I did, Charley, was I would ensure that I would drink as much as possible, which is something I'm certainly not proud of, and it has been a bit of a shadow for me in my life of hiding some things that I was running away from. But I would ensure that I would drink as much as possible before I would go out partying, so I didn't have to go out and buy drinks that were so much more expensive, and I'd choose to try and go out somewhere that was close to home, so I didn't have like a massive distance to get home, or I would take the bus and then walk home rather than jump in a taxi and do all that sort of stuff. So it's very, very similar there. And it's crazy. I think there's so many people that do it, but a vast majority of people, or way bigger majority of people that don't do it, don't do those sorts of sacrifices. And you're right. Like for me, I didn't just go, oh yeah, I'm saving some money now and I'm going to go away and buy an investment. I had to learn how to buy that investment first, or I had to educate myself and get some sort of financial education. Like you said, reading the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books and reading all these different books about financial education. A lot of people may want to go away and read The Barefoot Investor. And I know a lot of people who have read it because that's a really good financial education book. But that's in line with what you're saying, Charley, is, paying for education. And I don't know if people know this quote, and you've heard it before. I'm sure you've heard it before, Charley, but the best investment is the one in yourself. And that investing in yourself, investing in your own education and growing, because then that never goes anywhere, right? You can't unlearn something, but some investments that you do make, they're not the best. And they can affect you, but when you invest in education, that knowledge doesn't go anywhere, right? That's like, you can't run away from it.
Yeah, it is the best investment you can make. And I look at like, I'm yet to find a business owner that I respect or someone I consider successful that hasn't made that investment. There's no one out there in my world. Maybe they exist. I highly doubt it though. But education is like a very big part of those first initial steps, and something that I think, paves the way for future success as well. That is a part of the business journey.
Yeah. And so you were, say, roughly making about $1,000 a week as a plumber, same as me, right? I was making about $1,000 a week as a plumber too. It's crazy how similar we are. But what did you work out? There was a certain percentage of money that you would spend on food, accommodation, and transport, and then what you would save, and like, how did you go about that? Because mine, I'm interested, and is mine very similar to yours as well?
Well, I treated it a little bit progressive, to be honest. So like from where I was at zero. Like I wasn't paying attention to anything. Like it was just whatever happened in the week. So like I started in the idea of like, I think I read something that said like start at 10%. So that's where I started. I quickly realized though that like 10% wasn't going to be enough. So hiked that up to like 25% as soon as possible. And it was quite, as I said, the adjustment phase of spending less sucks. No one's going to say it's fun, because it's not. But like you get used to it very, very quickly. And I found like personally is like once I was used to it, I didn't even notice it anymore. And like every week that I saw my savings growing, it actually made me more confident and more excited, which was just so important when it came to that. It really it was the light at the end of the tunnel. And then I came across someone and he said something to me. He's like, you have to accept that if you're going to be a business owner, or you're going to go down the path that you're going of wealth creation, owning businesses, he's like, you have to accept that you're going to be different. Like you're going to be unusual to the common person. They're never going to understand like the idea of, saving up to buy a business. They're going to look at the amount of reading and education you're doing, and they're going to think you're crazy. And what's interesting is like 5 years later, they're the ones that are going to be asking you for advice. They're the ones that are going to go like, what happened? And like he said something else is like, why would you want to be normal? The normal person is broke, sick, and overweight. And it's like, it makes no sense to be normal. You want to be different.
Yeah, that's something that I have told many people before, myself, Charlie, is like, I know if people are having that life there, and that's something that I don't want, I need to do everything that is opposite to what they're doing. Everything. And I think it's actually helped me very well, right?
It's scary how well that works. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. It
shouldn't be. But I just realized, like, if somebody's doing this and I don't want that in my life, I have to do the exact opposite. And it just stacks up on so many different levels and so many different aspects of life. And it's something that I wouldn't say I pride myself on it, but I know that if I go away and do the opposite to most people, my life is going to be very, very different. And I'm going to be, I don't want to be labeled and fitted into a box and, categorized. I want to be very different and have a very different life, because that's what's going to fulfill me, and having fun and stuff like that. But I love that lesson that you learnt from somebody you met, but especially accepting that, that's huge. That's a huge thing to learn. And I also wanted to touch on, I forget what it was now.
I'm jumping in then. I got a question for you, because this was actually something that was really challenging for me at this phase of my life. I'm having like reminisce moments. But like once you started on this path, Jared, right? Let's say, we're younger version of Jared, and we're saving up for our business and we're starting to live life a bit differently than we used to. How did the opinions of others, and particularly friends and family, challenge you or help you at this point? Because I'll open with an example before you answer that. I was very lucky that I had a very supporting partner and now wife. I probably wouldn't have made it without her backing me, because most of the people around me were very negative. Like my parents thought I was insane for leaving perceivably a great job. My friends didn't understand. And again, like when you stop going out all weekend and just, writing yourself off, that can be heavily challenging as well. But it was like I had a rock in my corner, but it's not everyone has that rock. And I'm very curious to know, like, it sounds like from what I know of you, you probably had some very supportive family, which made a huge difference. But in general, like that can be, I think, something that throws people. And like when they start saving, this is one of the things that can almost take you off course. You start and then influences around you go, oh, and you end up back on the wrong track.
Yeah, it comes back to environment is stronger than willpower. and choosing your environment well. And I am very, very lucky, and I'm very grateful to my family, who is everybody in my family is super supportive of one another. And I do have a few core friends that are super supportive as well. But to everybody else, especially being on the job site, everybody's got a freaking opinion, right? And I can remember even when I bought my first business, I was making some money, and it was almost like everybody that I was working with and I was a supervisor of this plumbing firm with a couple of other people, and then we had a few, tradesmen with us and apprentices and stuff like that. And then, on one of the bigger job sites I was on, a few other people caught wind of what I was doing, and it was kind of like they were egging against me to not make it because I was breaking out of the mold, and I
can't resist it. The tall poppy.
Yeah, exactly.
Ah, the worst. I'm sorry to hear that, Jared. Continue.
And for those that are listening, it's going to happen. And I was listening to something the other day, and somebody said for success, you need to have thick skin, and not just thick skin, like if you've got calluses on your hand, but like if you've been walking around for like 20 years without shoes on, and your heels are super thick, like skin that's thick, to not let this sort of stuff penetrate, because it's very discouraging when you've got a massive environment. And that's why what it actually did for me, Charlie, is it just pushed me harder to be like, F this, I am definitely going to prove these guys wrong. And now it's a totally different story, and it's not like, yay, I proved them wrong. It's more about like, yay, I get to do what I really want to do. And it's not like, like, look where you're at now. It's like, if I can just scoop all of them up into my arms and then bring them along, I really want to do that. But to come back to it is that for everybody listening, you will have that thing where people will discourage you, and sometimes it feels like everybody's discouraging you. And even when like you come home and you have like a wine to your parents or your partner, and they're so supportive of you, but sometimes that can also hurt you as well, when it's like, well, maybe you should give it a break, or maybe you should stop trying that for a little bit because it's not really working right now. And that can, when you get a little bit down and somebody else supports you in the opposite direction, that can kill you just as bad.
I witnessed something that I have to bring up. I once was going to meet my accountant, and I got there a little bit early, and there was a McDonald's next to his office. Now, that's not something I normally eat at all, but I go in there and I thought, I'll just grab a coffee. They actually have all right coffee, as a side note. So I had a coffee, and I'm sitting down in there, and I'm on my laptop just looking at some things, and there was these two girls that were sitting on like the booth next to me, loud young girls, which is how I could hear them, because they were definitely loud. And like one of the girls went up and ordered and got a meal, and one of the girls didn't get anything at all. And she told the friend, hey, look, I've been working really hard on my diet and trying to get in shape, so I'm not going to get anything from Macca's. And the other girl, which is McDonald's, by the way, when I say Macca's. Yeah. And the other girl proceeded to get, her meal and sit down and eat the whole thing. And then towards the end of it, she got another pack of nuggets and basically sat there convincing the friend on a diet of going things like, well, one nugget won't hurt. I just have a couple. And then to my disbelief, after this friend had just said how much effort they'd been putting into their diet and things, to slim down and be healthy, she corrupted the friend. And before they left, the girl who had stood strong at the start had caved in and bought an entire meal. And I will never forget for the rest of my life just how dangerous it can be to have the wrong influences as friends around you.
Yeah, and this is, I never like to tell this stuff, but for myself personally, like when I used to drink a lot, and like I said before, it was just like me masking some stuff that I wanted to run away from in life. But when I decided, all right, and I'm not gonna do this anymore. It's I want to choose a different path and a path of health, and being conscious and being on the point and on the ball with things in life. I still had an environment of people that were drinking, and I remember how hard it was just wanting to hang out with my friends like in the evenings or going to parties, and then it's like egging us on to go away and be like making them feel comfortable at your expense. And it's so disgusting to be around somebody that's not a real friend, right? So and this comes back to the point where I say environment's stronger than willpower. I didn't like cut people out. I wasn't like brutal, like F off, I'm not going to ever see you again. I just like slowly weaned my way out of being in that environment. And my friends started to notice, and my better friends were supportive of that, and they were cool with that, and they didn't really try and push and egg me on. And then as the years got on, like I just got more and more solid in that. And it comes to, I want to tell this other thing that I learned as well is, in life we've got easy choices and we've got hard choices. And this is something I learned from Tim Ferriss. And he says the easy choices make your life harder and the hard choices make your life easier. So for me, if I'm going to go away and go to a party and I don't want to drink, and then I've got everybody peer pressuring me to drink so I can become, the center of attention in the party. And I used to be quite a party animal, should I say, and used to get heavily onto the alcohol. And if my choice was like, I'm going to go away and cave into this, it's an easy choice to just cave into peer pressure, and then that's going to make my life harder. So the easy choices make your life harder. And so from doing that, the next day I'd be hungover, or I'd have a 2 or 3 day hangover, and that's going to make my life harder when I go to work. But if I chose the hard choice and I put my foot down and said, no, I'm not going to do this, it makes my life easier in the sense that I can wake up the next day and I can go surfing and feel fresh and feel super excited and be in flow on the Monday instead.
Oh, that's so interesting, Jared, and so true. And I tell you what I find fascinating, like this podcast is actually about how to finance your first business. Like that's what we're talking about, is like getting yourself ready to buy your first business. And it's interesting that, as well as like, savings and living within our means, like definitely so important. But we've quickly identified like, one of the things that's going to take you off track with savings and getting down here is actually like your influences and environment. So who you're spending your time with. And I think that this is just adds so much more to the cause of why you would want to be a part of a community like the one we're in, your lovely community, because like you're around people who are doing this stuff, which in tune makes that the norm and the influences. And big shout out, I'm going to call him out. Big shout out to Sam, who recently bought his site and is doing it. It's been inspirational to kind of watch that. And it's kind of leveled me up a little bit as well.
It's so good to see, and talking about support, like people posting in, like somebody posted, I don't know if you saw this, Charlie, somebody posted in a photo of a lion just going for gold, like just a photo of a lion, and Sam's got this mustache, and somebody went and grabbed that photo of a lion and put like some facial hair on it, and then reposted it back into the group as a bit of a joke, funny but very supportive. So you can have that seriousness and support, but also that fun. And thanks. Like it's a great shout out to Sam. So keep killing it, man.
Absolutely, keen to see what he does. I can tell he's going to be over the years. He's going to be one to watch. I'm calling it now. He's hungry.
He's hungry.
A bit of hunger. But I wanted to ask you this, Jared, then. So, like, obviously, we've both been on a journey, and, like, with that journey and, like, going through this, you learn a lot. And I often think, like, God, the things I could do if I could go back in time with what I know now. So, while we can't do that yet, and, I say yet, hopefully time travel will be possible soon, we can actually give this wisdom to other people. So if you were someone who's just starting on this journey now, how would you go about it knowing what you know now? Like, what would you encourage people to do with getting themselves set up to finance their first website?
Awesome question. And maybe, our next investment can be a time machine, Charlie.
If anyone's listening, just let me know if you know anyone in this type of technology.
Angel investors over here. So, that's really, really good question. What would I do now, and like how I would advise people, to do something to take a different path. And basically what I would do if I was starting fresh and I was still plumbing is I would say be making $1,000 a week, and I would spend my money on accommodation. I'd make sure I wouldn't be living in the slums, obviously, but also food, accommodation, and transport, and then a little bit of entertainment. But what I would do is I'd be wise with my entertainment on the weekends. Like I wouldn't go out drinking and partying every single weekend and spending a whole lot of money on that entertainment. I would eat more at home, and maybe if I was drinking, drink more at home, and ensure that I could go to the park and do fun things with friends and free things like hiking and surfing, and get a whole lot of free entertainment. Like often the free entertainment is like far better. It's in the experience, not in the thing that you're doing. So I would definitely do that, and I would take that $1,000 and I'd spend maybe $300 to $400 on total cost of living, and then I would put the rest of it in. I'd set up and this is what I get a lot of people to do when they first start working with us, is set up a scheduled transfer. So into a new savings account. So if you go away and set up a savings account, a separate savings account, which is, you call it your investment account. And with that investment account, the money that goes into your normal account from work is, I would have it go straight, like about half of it, 50% of it, or a little bit less or a little bit more, goes as a scheduled transfer straight into that investment account, and have that done every single week. And I wouldn't do it manually. And the reason I wouldn't do it manually is because I have to go away and think about it and do it every week. And then sometimes I'm going to forget about it because I'm a human being, the human everything there. And so what I would do is I'd have maybe anywhere in between $250 to $500 scheduled every single week to go into that investment account. And then there's this other thing called compound interest. And I know that you know what compound interest is, Charlie, but some people listening may not know what compound interest is. And this is something that I learnt in my financial education from reading books. But the compound effect of the interest that you gain is like, later on in life, and this is how Warren Buffett got very, very successful with his investments, is the compounding effect. It just got larger and larger and larger, that portfolio and the amount of money that he owns now. And that's a huge thing. So guys, go away and look at the compound effect. And I think, I would just be saving a lot more money. And whilst I'm saving that money, is invest in my financial education and the education in the direction of what sort of investments I want to make from that investment account. So Charlie, that's what I would do, but what would you do differently? How would you go about it? If you were like, all right, cool, got back to clean slate and no more debt, got rid of the car, all that sort of stuff, what would you do?
Do you know what? It's with where I'm at right now, I'd almost first off, actually, I'll go a step back. First off, I love your plan, Jared. I think that's a very reasonable plan for people if you're in a job at the moment. But I wanted to ask a deeper question. Let's pretend that someone's maybe not earning that much, or maybe they're in a lower paying job. Would you encourage someone to take things to a bigger extreme and maybe, living at home with mum and dad, if that's possible? Yes,
100% yes. And maybe I lived at home for a while with my parents and I loved it. It was actually kind of sad. Well, it was sad when I left. My parents didn't want me to leave, and I didn't really want to leave, but I did at the same time, and it was a part of the thing that I wanted to do to grow up and do my own thing. But it's a sacrifice, and it's not all bad. You can learn so much from your parents when you do move back home. And say, if you weren't earning that whole lot of money, and it's a different case scenario. Well, let's bring it back to Sam. Okay, Sam was working same as us, crazy, right? Plumber, and
there's a theme here. I'm just saying.
And so he was, doing a bit of work, but what he was doing, I was like, mate, we're going to need to start earning a bit more money. He's like, so hungry. He's like, what do I do? I was like, mate, just work more. And he's like, okay. And he went out and he just he's just doing cashies in the afternoon. He's getting jobs on Airtasker and he's just doing anything he can do to earn more money. And that was a sacrifice. Like he posted the other day, it was a sacrifice for 2 years, which in my opinion is hardly anything to get to where he's at right now. Luckily, he had a lot of education and somebody, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, on his side. But there's that hunger there to earn more money. And so somebody that's working, 20 hours a week, you can't expect to go away and change your life massively. And I'm not condoning work as many hours as you can. You got to have some rest. That's very important. But if you're only earning a certain amount of money, go away and get a different job and earn more money, or go away and, get a second job and earn more money that way. I would say making some sacrifices, like moving into a cheaper place, selling the car. Like a lot of the people that I've worked with is they got this car and they got all this debt. And I'm like, look, let's just get rid of that debt. Let's get rid of that car. Let's downgrade. Is it serving you? They say no. We say, okay, let's do something different. And so getting rid of the debt, and that's some of the suggestions I would make.
Yeah, so like the world's changed a lot since I was in this space. It's very different, but you just mentioned something so interesting, is the idea that, we could do Uber, or we could do gigs on Airtasker. Like there's so many ways to like supplement income these days. And even like if you bought a website, there's nothing stopping you with driving Uber at night or doing things like that to create an easier transition. Like the world's very different than it used to be.
And just take up a cleaning job, like driving Uber, cleaning, anything. And you can listen to podcasts and get your education, financial education in that time. They call it second time, I think, or secondary learning or whatever it is. But you can listen to stuff while you're doing these kind of monotonous jobs, but it's serving because it's your education time as well.
Yeah, totally. I think when to answer your question now of coming back to it, is that, if it was me, like clear the decks first, like don't carry debt. I think if you have a mortgage, obviously that's a different type of debt. I'm not going to go into that here, but things like cars and credit cards and like loose loans, like all that stuff's got to be cleaned up. You don't want to carry any of that. But then when I look at it now, I think that, having a job for a duration of time is okay. And you can often learn and pick up a lot of skills there. And I think it serves a really great purpose, in all honesty. So I think it's a good thing to work and save and build skills. I would still definitely do that before just, gaining massive amounts of debt. And then if I had to supplement my income, I would probably do Uber or whatever was needed to lift that from there. But that would be my way of going into it. And I suppose one of the things I wish I did more of is just picking people to hang around. Like I really wish, the one thing I wish someone would take from this is like just get around more people who are thinking like this and doing these types of things, because it just shifts the mindset of what we may think is possible, and it would have been a bigger advantage for me if I'd have done that. So that's what I would really do these days.
Yeah. Coming back to environment is way stronger than willpower, and that you've got to have, maybe this is something I just thought of now, but maybe we weigh it up like a scale that thick skin versus environment. Like you could have not as thick skin, but a really good environment, which would be the same as a bad environment, but with really, really thick skin. So if you could play that sort of stuff out, imagine if you had super thick skin, but a really good environment, you'd be unstoppable, right? And I also want to add to what Charlie's saying is like, there's so many things that we can do to earn more money, and what we're both saying in this whole podcast is that, you can do lots of things differently with your finances. And I want to let everybody know, like Charley and I are not legal financial advisors. Whilst we're financially free, we're not legal financial advisors. So, you can do what you want with your finances, but that's a really important thing to note, is that you've got people out there that are way more financially free than financial advisors, right? I think they call them, finance broker is normally broker than somebody that's not financially free. Have you heard that one?
Yeah, well, I mean, I probably shouldn't say this on the podcast, but I'm going to. It was funny that once upon a time, and I can't name names here, but someone we knew who had a financial planning business was actually broke. And we used to just laugh about the irony of this person was legitimately serving and giving financial advice. So I won't name names, but it's like it definitely exists. Like question people who have certifications, definitely.
Yeah, and it's not just financial advisors, but accountants and different thing. And there's a certain massive percentage of people that aren't financial advisors that aren't financially free. But whilst I'm here, my brother is a financial advisor, and he does good. He's lives an amazing life, and he owns his own firm, obviously. So people that are financial advisors for another firm, it's normally a different story.
Yeah, definitely, Jared. I'll commend on that one.
Yeah, so we covered so many things here, Charlie, on education, what we would do differently, environment, easy choices, hard choices. I do have one sort of question I want to wrap up with is what would you do? Is there anything to add to what we've spoken about that you would do differently if you was going to start again?
Yeah, I let fear and other people's opinions weigh in way too much in my decision making. I got to a point and I realized that, this is my life. I get one shot at this, and it's playing it safe in a job that you don't like is a crime. We shouldn't be allowed to do it. I thought very much about, what I wanted to do before I kicked the bucket. And it wasn't working for someone else, in plumbing. So what I'd really get people to think about, or what I would, pass on is don't let security and safety drive everything. Swing for the fence, do something great, have what you want in life.
Yeah, because YOLO, right? And whilst that's funny to say, but the thing about fears is a lot of people don't want to be fearful, but the obstacle is the way. On the opposite side of that fear is actually once we tackle that, we're so much more freer when we have tackled it, rather than being locked down by this job or whatever the thing that's supposedly, in inverted commas, secure, when it's often, in my opinion, Charlie, it's more insecure than it is secure, because you don't have control over if you're going to get paid next week, and if are you going to keep your job. And I know that firsthand, because my first plumbing job as an apprentice, I was a second-year apprentice. I came in one day and everybody was stealing tools from the company, and I said, "What's going on?" They said, "Oh, I'll go home, you don't have a job." And I said, "Well, I need a job because you guys owe me $13,000. And that wasn't secure, and I was locked into apprenticeship. I remember a lot of people telling me, "Oh yeah, get an apprenticeship, you're guaranteed 4 years of work." Doesn't matter. You're not guaranteed anything. The only person that can guarantee something is yourself, and you go out and do it yourself for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, Jared.
So, again, Charlie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. There was so much awesome things that we covered right there. And I really, really do appreciate you jumping on. Where can people find out more about you and what you do, Charlie?
Yeah, so just head over, if anyone wants to learn more about me, head over to charleyvalher.com. That's CharleyValher.com. All my projects and companies are all listed on there, but definitely the place.
Awesome. Again, thanks so much for the show. That's it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening as well. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you did like this podcast, please go away and leave a review letting me know what you liked about it. Thanks, guys. See ya.